and at this point, Michael Beers and Grace Decker had indicated they won't be here, and so I'm not certain if Michael Smith and Corbin will get here, but the remaining trustees are present. And now we move on to item number 2, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag
of the United States
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. And now we move on to item number 3, which is to review, revise, and approve the agenda. Do any of the trustees have any requests to either change the order of things or to revise the agenda items? Seeing none, then we'll continue with the agenda as it was originally set. So thus we come to number 4, which is public comment and correspondence. We do have one document of written correspondence in the packet, and public comment at this time is for non-agenda items, things that we won't be talking about later in the meeting, and therefore they're items that we won't be making any decisions on. However, this is the opportunity for the public to let us know as the district and as the trustees about anything that you are interested in, positive, negative, or otherwise, that might fall underneath the district and the board's jurisdiction, so to speak. So if you can come up and state your name and spell your last name if it's an unusual spelling, or if our secretary is not familiar with the spelling of your last name. If you represent an organization, please indicate what organization. And if you can limit your comments to around 3 minutes, we appreciate it, around there so much. And so, public comment.
Thank you. Melanie Charlson, President, Missoula Education Association, Vice President, MEA MFT. I again stand before you this evening encouraging your involvement in the nomination process of this Department of Education Secretary. I don't know if you had an opportunity last week to watch much of the hearings. I did watch nearly the entirety of the 3-hour plus hearings, and found frustration at just about every comment. There were several in there that certainly gives us pause and concern. A few of them that I want to note, if you had not had an opportunity, you could go to the C-SPAN site, and the entire text is there available, as well as the video for your review, if you have any doubt as to what I'm sharing this evening. One of her most troubling concerns to me was her views on guns in schools. She did state, when asked point blank by Senator Murphy out of Connecticut, if she felt that guns in schools should be allowed, and her response regarding if schools in Wyoming may need them to protect against grizzly bears, that might be a fine thing. And Senator Murphy gave a follow-up: if President Trump were to repeal the Gun-Free School Zone Act, would she be in favor of that? And she said she'd be in favor of what the president chose to do. She further continued in questions from Senator Franklin out of Minnesota. She could not articulate the proficiency versus growth models in education, did not have any idea what that meant, and didn't seem to have any background knowledge as to why that's an issue in education. And then, of course, her comments regarding Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, really could not articulate that. In fact, her comments were that that is an item best left to the states, and that accountability should not be a component of that. So all of this quite troubling. So I'm encouraging you to speak with, give a shout out to Senator Daines. I was at Senator Daines' office this afternoon speaking against Betsy Voss's nomination here, and his staff indicated that he is indeed leaning towards her confirmation, that he will cast a yes vote. I also would like to give a shout out to Senator Tester, who yesterday publicly announced that he will be voting no. So a thank you to Senator Tester might also be in order, and so I do encourage Senator Daines to join Senator Tester. On another note, just a reminder that tomorrow, 3 of us from Missoula EA and 3 of us from administration are hopping on a plane in the afternoon to the thriving metropolis of balmy Minneapolis, Minnesota. And we're really excited for 2 days of work with NEA regarding network improvement communities and how we might offer a partnership for our new hires and mentoring them as they move through Missoula County Public Schools. So it's my intent 2 weeks from tonight to give you a report back on how that body of work goes these next few days and share with you some thoughts as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other public comment on non-agenda items? Seeing none, then we'll move on to item number 5 on the agenda, which are reports and announcements. And so the first is the Advanced Technology Group, and I believe Superintendent Thane has some introductions to make and an explanation as to what's going on, since it's pretty exciting news.
Well, thank you very much. A number of months ago, Susan Hay Patrick actually referred a couple gentlemen to us. There's a group in Missoula called ATG, and in just a moment they'll give you an explanation about what their firm has endeavored to do and their growth in Missoula. And they determined that they would like to begin some philanthropic work in the community. And they reached out to the district and had a number of questions. We did a sit down with them, and lo and behold, they saw fit to make an award to Missoula County Public Schools. And we're really thrilled tonight to have Stuart Clemo and Mark Anderson here on behalf of ATG to make a presentation to Teacher Dan Landy and Principal Ted Fuller from Sentinel High School. We've heard a lot lately about the computer science classes at Sentinel High School, and we've endeavored over the last couple of years to implement new curriculum. The students have been extremely engaged, very receptive. Dan has just been a wonderful find for the district, speaking of new teachers and retention of teachers. And in addition to this award tonight, we'll be hearing in the very near future about another award the class and his students have garnered. So we're really proud of the program. We're very appreciative of ATG and their support of the program. So with that, I'd like to ask Mark and Stuart if they want to come forward and just give a little background on ATG, and then we can go ahead with the presentation. So thank you, Stuart.
Yes. Mark Anderson here. I'm standing in for Tom Sturgis, our Vice President for ATG. Just kind of two things, a quick introduction to ATG as a company, and then again building on what Superintendent Thane was saying about the gift itself. ATG is a consulting firm. We do software consulting for companies in Montana and then across the world. Here in Missoula, we're about to celebrate our 100th employee working downtown for us. We are the largest office, with offices also in St. Louis and Kansas City. We are trying to be more deliberate and intentional about our philanthropic efforts. We worked with Superintendent Thane as well as Hatton Littman starting in May of 2016 to start a dialogue, and we're presented with some really great opportunities. That opportunity led to a gift of $3,500 to the school district, and I believe that went to, the majority of the funds went to Sentinel High School Computer Science Program. Now in 2017, we're looking to do another investment in the school district. We see this as kind of the beginnings of a relationship with the school district, and so we're excited to see where this goes. Anything else?
No, that nailed it.
Okay.
Dan, would you talk just a little bit about what you intend to do?
Yeah, so, well, one, I just want to thank these guys and ATG as a whole. So this is a great donation to our program. So we have some ideas about what we're going to use it for. We're going to do some classroom upgrades, get a second projector for our classroom. Kids are always watching me code and working with me, so that'll make it easier for them to see what's going on. We'll do some practical classroom upgrades, get some uninterruptible power supplies for our servers and our 3D printers so that if we get power blips, we don't lose everything. Some wireless dongles for our machines, and then we'll use some of the money for our computer science club activities, traveling to competitions. We usually travel to Helena and Billings for programming competitions, so that'll be a great boost to those efforts.
Well, again, we would like to thank ATG for reaching out to us, actually, and for your support of our students. We think there's great potential in this community for development of technology skills and soft skills that can support your efforts in the community as a growing, thriving business. We believe in the partnership and look forward to continuing that on into the future. So thank you very much. And if I may, I'd like to break with protocol just a little bit and make a quick announcement about a second item with regard to Sentinel High School, if I could, while Dan and Ted and Stuart and Mark are still present. This would normally have been part of my superintendent's report, but Sentinel High School students submitted an app idea to the Verizon Innovative Learning App Challenge and were awarded the Best in State Award. They're currently in competition for the Best in Nation Award, as well as a fan favorite contest. So the students developed their app during the Project Lead the Way computer science class, and the final submission was titled Classroom Assistant. The Nationwide App Challenge Fan Favorite Award will be given to the team that receives the most votes for its app concept. So I'm encouraging people to vote for Sentinel High School's project, and you can do that by texting Class Assist, CLASSASST, to 22333 on any mobile device by February 14th. And Sentinel's in the running for an additional $15,000 award based on the fan favorite contest. So again, Dan and his students have put together a very practical application, allowing students to have greater mobile access and stay in touch with their obligations at school. And if you'd take just a moment, Dan, and tell us about that, we'd appreciate it.
So in 3 of my computer science classes, I had groups of 5 to 7 submit ideas for this app challenge. So we had 7 submissions. The winning team, made up of mostly sophomores, a couple juniors, they submitted an idea for Classroom Assistant to help them communicate better with their teachers and be able to more easily see their grades and assignments through a phone app rather than just through a web interface. We had a lot of other great app ideas too, but this one was chosen as best in state for the high school division. So I really would like to see these guys get the votes and be able to move on. If they win the fan favorite vote, they'd get to go to nationals, travel to Orlando, present their app. The $15,000 would help them work towards developing the app in its entirety, and they would get some training from MIT app inventor developers, so it would be a great opportunity for them. So I'm hoping we can really push that vote out there.
So I'll put that text information on the board here in just a few minutes. But again, we appreciate you being here. And Ted, if you'd like to wrap it up.
I would love to, thanks. I need to say a couple things, obviously, as everybody has how much we appreciate HEG and the support. And I can say Dan is modest and will exercise humility, but one thing you don't know about him, he was in the private sector as well as a university professor prior to coming to Sentinel, and has been an entrepreneur and a founder of a startup, and he really approaches his work as though it is a calling. And the reason these students are so empowered and so successful is his inspiration. And for ATG to just fuel that fire is massive. I really cannot overemphasize the impact. We talk a lot about 21st century skills and real world learning. Well, these students aren't just practicing in a classroom. They are engaged in the sort of activity that is driving our economy and is driving the information age. So it's really, for me as a principal, extraordinary to see we've been able to scale up the program from its infancy to what it is now, and it's really pretty spectacular. And so I've said it before, but thank you guys. We appreciate it immensely, and their gift will go, directly to students and directly to the sort of experiences that, frankly, are changing the world. And as far as the app challenge, you can also go to the Sentinel homepage, and they had to make a video to submit for the national competition. You can watch the video right off of the Sentinel homepage, and it's a pretty cool thing. So, yeah. Thank you very much.
Good job.
And I'll just add my thanks to Mark and Stuart for being here, and thank Tom as well. And thanks, congratulations, Dan. Sounds like I want to go back to school. I love computer coding, and also, it's information only, but I don't know if any other trustees have any comments or questions for these guys, or if there's any public comment on this point. Other than that, it looks like we're getting ready to start making you guys be a fan favorite. So thanks so much. I know that you all have busy nights, so feel free to leave whenever is appropriate, and so we'll be moving on to the next item. So the next item is student trustee reports, and I see we have Annika and Dylan. So I don't know if you've come ready with a report or not, because...
You didn't?
Pardon?
Oh.
Right. I was just going to explain that we've asked our student trustees to come every first meeting of the month with reports, but just in case something interesting's happened in the meantime, and since we have them here, I wanted to give them the opportunity to give us any recent updates. Other than that, we really appreciate you being here for the meeting, and thank you so much for doing that.
Okay, so Dylan said he doesn't have one, but I do. I came
Okay.
very prepared. So upcoming in sports, basketball against Glacier on this Thursday. Boys home and girls are away. On Saturday, the 28th, they play against Flathead. Girls are home and boys are away. In the next few weeks, basketball will be taking on Capital, Helena High, Big Sky, and Sentinel. Wrestling competes tonight at Glacier. They will also attend the Garden City Duels at Big Sky this Friday, the 27th. Their division seating will be February 4th in Helena, and they leave for state in Billings the 9th through the 11th in February. Swimming has one last meet on the 28th before state, which is February 10th and 11th for the varsity swimmers. Speech and debate is heading to state this Friday and Saturday in Bozeman. Practices will continue for the following 2 weeks, leading up to national qualifiers in Great Falls. After a 2-week break, dance team will perform again at upcoming basketball games at Hellgate on the 26th, February 2nd, 4th, and 11th. Dance team will also take part in On Center's company concert show alongside of Sentinel and dance teams as an evolution of dance. The shows will be February 9th through 11th at MCT. In other news, this Thursday the 26th, the 9th grade ski trip will take place all day. Tomorrow night, the 25th, Poetry Out Loud is in Hellgate Auditorium at 6:30, and Senior Diego will be emceeing. And then lastly, tonight is a one-of-a-kind concert at Hellgate put on by 3 NHS students, Kat Liston, Bridger Liston, and Lauren D'Angelo. The concert features a variety of Hellgate's own music and musicians, and all the proceeds go towards Hellgate Music Department. The 3 students who put the concert on together are doing it for their NHS project. The concert is entitled Money for Music. And as of noon today, they've already raised about $500 in donations before the concert even started.
Thanks so much. And as I indicate at every meeting, we'd love you to stay as long as you can, but knowing that you have school obligations and other obligations, also feel free to leave whenever you can. Thanks. So now we move on to 5C, which is the Health Insurance Trust Fund report that's found on page 6. It's the routine Health Insurance Trust Fund report, and this is the report for the month of December 2016. It's for information purposes. And the next item is D, which is the high school activities report from the fall of 2016, and it's the high school activity report for fall 2016, and it is found on page 7, and again, it's for information only, and there is no oral report. And then we move on to announcements from the superintendent. As Superintendent Thane indicated, he already gave a pre-shout out for the class assistant, but I'm sure you have a few others.
Actually, I'll be very brief. The main point I wanted to make is class assist, text to 22333, and I hope everybody will pull out their smartphone at some time this evening and do that. Last week, a number of trustees did school visits to Chief Charlo, Russell, and Lewis and Clark, and Thursday, February 9th, we'll have our second round. We'll go to Mount Jumbo and see the Lowell students utilizing the Mount Jumbo facility. We'll tour Rattlesnake and Paxson, which both have their new additions open. So trustee visits beginning at 8:30 a.m. Thursday, February 9th. Monday, February 13th is the caucus day on the Hill. I know we have a number of us from Missoula that will be attending. We understand Governor Bullock and Superintendent of Public Instruction Arnston will participate, and we will be in contact with our local legislators and encourage them to join us for lunch on that date. Our next regular board meeting is Valentine's Day, Tuesday, February 14th. We'll hope that we don't have too extensive an agenda so that you can enjoy Valentine's Day. And we'll follow that up on Monday, February 20th with President's Day, which is a holiday, and there will be no school and all district offices will be closed. Thank you.
And now we move on to 5F, which is announcements from trustees. Are there any announcements from any trustee? I have one short one. I had the chance today at a lunch meeting to hear from Leon Slater about the Hellgate Band's trip to Pearl Harbor to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the event at Pearl Harbor. And it sounded like it was an amazing opportunity and very, very special for all the students. So I was glad to have a chance to see visually how impactful it was for the students and how there were only 17 bands that were invited. And so it was a really, really nice thing. And I want to give a shout out to Gabby, one of our student trustees, because she had mentioned the trip since she was on it, and so I was able to get Leon to come and do a presentation to a bigger audience because of her enthusiasm. So I just wanted to mention a thank you to Gabby for doing that, and that's my announcement. And seeing no other announcements, then we move on to the consent agenda. This is the agenda item where the board addresses routine perfunctory items that we see on a regular basis each month. And by placing them on the consent agenda, there will be no board discussion of the items since they're routine items that we see each time. Any trustee can pull an item on the consent agenda off if there's any need for discussion. Other than that, we do take public comment on any of the 3 items listed. The first is to approve the MCPS student attendance agreements, which is found on page 9. Then we see the flip of that, which is to approve out-of-district attendance agreements, which is found on page 10, and then to approve the revenue and expenditure reports that is found on page 11, and these are for the December 2016 revenue and expenditure reports. And so, as I indicated, we won't be taking any trustee comment, or we won't be discussing it as trustees, but we do take public comment, if there is any. Seeing none, then I would entertain, I guess we should have had the motion first before we went to comment, but we'll assume that we'll fix that error. So is there a motion to approve the 3 items on the consent agenda? Moved by trustee Wake and seconded by trustee Kendall. And normally now we would have public comment, so I'll give one more opportunity. And seeing no public comment, then all those trustees in favor of approving the 3 items that I've just described on the consent agenda, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is all trustees present have voted to approve the items. Thanks, Elizabeth. Then we move on to 7A, teaching and learning under new business. This is to approve an out-of-country travel request, and Mrs. Robitaille is going to explain about Sentinel High School students traveling to Japan.
Thank you. Drew Burfind submitted, he's a social studies teacher at Sentinel, submitted the request to take students to our sister city partner high school for Sentinel in Kumamoto, Japan. This is a trip that occurs every other year. I think it's been a while since Sentinel took a group of students, so it's nice to see that they're reconnecting and reinitiating that trip. So it does impact 8 school days, but it's an excellent experience that our students have been afforded, and I know the other high schools participate as well.
And so before I entertain a motion, are there any questions or that need clarification? Trustee Kendall?
This sounds really cool, and I just wondered if you know anything about how the fundraising works? Is there
I
a
don't.
plan? Okay.
I don't, but I can sure find out, Trustee Kendall.
I'm just curious to know, because it seems like it's a pretty good chunk of money, and so, you know, a lot of times activities have a specific kind of fundraising plan that they use. And I did have another question, which is, and it's not specific to this question, and I don't know who knows the answer to this, but in our field trips like this, are there opportunities, and I'm channeling Michael Beers here, are there opportunities for kids with disabilities to participate in these?
Yes.
So they will be accommodated if there's interest? Okay.
Yes,
Good.
absolutely.
Wonderful.
And I will find out about the fundraising component and report back to you.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions of Julie? Then is there a motion to approve the out-of-country travel request submitted to allow Sentinel High School students to travel to Kumamoto, if I'm saying that correctly, Japan? Moved by trustee Wake, seconded by trustee Lorenzen. Is there any board discussion? I'll just throw out that having just heard Mr. Slater talk about how to make sure trips out of mainland United States are handled in terms of fundraising. It sounds like there's a lot of fundraising that goes on to allow any student who's interested in going to be able to go. I think historically we've seen for prior trips of this magnitude that there are a lot of fundraising opportunities, and so that's why the requests come in pretty early, because once they know the trip's okayed, then that gives them the motivation to start outlining and lining up the various fundraising events. Just that's how it seems to go, so.
Still
other
lots of
board
snow
comments?
to shovel.
Right, apparently a lot of citrus fruit to sell and a lot of other things. Any other board comment? Any public comment? Seeing none, then all those trustees voting in favor of approving the out-of-country travel request we were just discussing, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. And then we move on to item B under new business, which is Smart Schools 2020. So I think Superintendent Thane's going to start with a short update on the Wide Area Network program, and then we'll turn it over to Burley.
Thank you, and I will be very brief. We had an update last month regarding the Wide Area Network, and that process continues. All of the Missoula area schools are now on the new Wide Area Network, with the exception of Rattlesnake Elementary. There's still some boring that needs to be done to reach that. The contract with Blackfoot to continue to serve Sealy and with enhanced speeds has been completed, and that's in place. We also have the latitude, once Mount Jumbo comes offline, to transition that contract to further support what occurs at Sealy. They're working right now with some switches to balance loads. We have gone from basically a couple hundred megs to a gigabyte, so we should see very impressive internet speeds. But until they get all the switches balanced, we won't have the full benefit. But the tech staff is working on that currently, and we're really excited about that prospect. They continue to work with the vendor on the wireless system, and they're putting an antenna up on Mount Dean Stone that will have line of sight to a number of our buildings to have a secondary wireless connection. So everything's moving along well in regard to the Wide Area Network implementation. And we certainly appreciate the work of Hatton, Russ, and the tech staff to make that all come to play. And I think what's really important to note is as they've switched over building by building, we haven't heard anything from staff. And I think that's impressive, because we anticipated there might be some difficulties with connectivity and making that switch, and it's been very seamless. And so we appreciate their forethought in the planning that made that all happen so efficiently. And with that, then Burley is going to give us an update on a couple of the facility projects. If you can get a function.
Okay. So we're currently finishing up, the punch list at Jefferson is actually complete. We're meeting actually on Thursday to hopefully finalize, or at least kind of line out the last couple things on the Charlotte punch list. And Paxson and Rattlesnake are still continuing through their process. So we're making a lot of leeway and should be wrapping things up here hopefully by the end of the month. Washington Middle School, Cold Springs, Russell, all their EIT meetings are full bore, going really good. I don't know if you heard, but on Thursday, A&E Architects with Cold Springs Project actually visited the school, and every student in that school got to do something, draw on the paper and kind of talk about what they want to see in a new school, and it was really cool. Got some really neat ideas, like chocolate moats and stuff like that going around the building. So really neat things, but some really innovative ideas as well too. So it was a neat process, and I'm sure that Cold Springs enjoyed that as well. Hellgate, we're currently working a lot with Jackson Contractor Group and MMW on working out phasing for that project. It's not a simple project to work that out, so we're today we met with Judson and Ms. Allen to really start to work through how that looks in the educational world, and we'll continue to work those details out. So it'll be a good process, but long ways to go there. The VOAG, I actually received a letter last week from the DEQ stating that they've finally received all the information that they need. At this point, who knows what's going to happen later, but they're looking into our permits that we're requesting, and hopefully we'll hear back soon. So we were hoping we hear something back in December, but we're still waiting. So that hopefully we hear something soon. Sealy Lake, punch list items again are continuing. We kind of approved some last minute change orders that we'll be working through. And we probably will see those work orders completed probably sometime in February, we're hoping. So they'll be kind of in and out throughout the next month or so. And then the gym floor, they covered the gym floor. There was some minor damages, but they have been able to kind of, there was some cupping, and they basically made some saw cuts in there so that the flooring would lay down, which is normal for the repair of the floor for those types of that type of damage. So it's not a permanent damage. It's definitely fixable, and it's been fixed to where it's safe and usable. And then what we'll do, come in probably over spring break and kind of rough it up and reseal it and make it look like a nice new clean gym floor. So we'll finish that up over springtime just because of the labor it includes, and it does produce a kind of a unlikable odor with the oil stain. So. And then we're going crazy with roofing projects right now, so we'll be seeing Sentinel Roofing will be the first roof to go out for bid, and we probably should see that. Oh, it's actually already out. Sorry, I'm getting this mixed up. They did their first walkthrough today, and it's kind of the first big roofing project going out in Missoula right now through some of the conversations, so we're really hopeful for some really good numbers. And then soon to follow after that, all within the next 6 weeks, we'll hopefully see Porter, Rattlesnake, Jefferson, and Hawthorne roofing projects go out. So I think we're really ahead of the game as far as the community goes. So we'll be looking at good numbers, I hope. So.
Just to clarify the Rattlesnake roof, it's the re-roof of the barrel on the gym. The other sections of the roof with the new construction have already been roofed, correct?
Actually, no. So the original contract for the Rattlesnake project was the gym, and because of timing and weather, they actually credited that back to us, and so we took that off the construction that we're wrapping up now. So it was something we took out of the contract and got the credit. So now we're going back out. But it's the same thing. Yeah, it's the gym. It's the re-roof there. So. Yeah.
Any questions for Burley? This is information only, but is there any public comment? Seeing none, then thanks for that update, both Mark and Burley, for letting us know in terms of wires and shingles and things like that, the updates. We appreciate it. Now we move on to B2, which is Memorandum of Understanding with Garden City Harvest, and this is information only, so Superintendent Thane will give us the background and the reason that we included in the packet a Memorandum of Understanding between MCPS and Garden City Harvest, and so if you'll...
Sure, I'll just give a brief introduction. Jean Zozel is here. Jean's a very familiar face. She's been engaged with Garden City Harvest for a number of years with the Peace Farm project, and we've appreciated the opportunity to partner with her. A few years back, we had conversations about a long-term lease of the Peace Farm so that Garden City Harvest had some assurance that any improvements and investments they made in the property would have value over time. And as we were going through that process, it was discussed that we should memorialize the educational aspects of the partnership. And that's been accomplished through completion of memorandum of understanding. Excuse me, and I want to express my appreciation to Elise for working with Jean to put the finishing touches on it. It's included in the packet this evening, and we would appreciate board support for the MOU. And Jean, I don't know if you, excuse me, wish to give any public comment. Maybe we should take the motion first and then have Jean come up.
I mean, if you have, if we have questions for Jean, we could ask them now, but why don't we just take, I'll take the chance, we're doing this by motion?
Please. Oh,
It's not listed as an action item. That's
Okay.
why I'm confused. I
I'm
was
sorry, I
thinking there's
apologize.
the possibility of a memorandum, I assumed, and perhaps Megan can correct me, is a memorandum of understanding that's within your authority to enter into without board action? Otherwise, we'll put it back on.
I believe so, but at this point, thank you. Since it isn't listed for an action item, you couldn't take action on it
Right.
anyway.
Yeah, I just didn't know whether we need to move it to the next meeting as an action item, or if we can thoroughly discuss it now and not have to see it back again. That's all I'm trying to figure out.
I
I
don't,
was just going to say, I'm not sure that we need to. The underlying contract contemplated a MOU just that reflected the educational services between Garden City Harvest. And I think it was intended to be a fluid document that would allow the school and Garden City Harvest to adjust based upon the services provided without that formality.
That, I guess that was my understanding, since we'd already entered into the contract, this is just something that adds some detail to the contract that the administration can enter into without board approval.
I would agree with that.
Okay? And so as a consequence, is there any board comment? It's information only, but any board comment? Trustee Kenneth?
I don't know if Jean does want to say anything about this, but I definitely do. I think this is fantastic, and I would love for us to get it signed as soon as we possibly can, so Jean doesn't change her mind. I mean, this is a lot that Garden City Harvest is going to be doing, and I'm just thrilled about that. It's going to be so, I mean, it is so great, and this kind of activity I know has been going on for some time. Do you, Jean, do you have a sense for what the value is of the services that you guys are going to be providing?
Yeah, it's around $50,000 a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
That's really, it's such a wonderful program, and I know, you know, it says somewhere in the MOU that there are aspects of this that are science and social studies, nutrition, history, ecology, math. I mean, it covers just about everything, and it's real hands-on learning for the kids. So I'm just very, very happy about this. Thank you for all that you've done.
Any other trustee comments? I guess I'll just echo what Heidi said. Now, thank you to both Elise. I mean, this took a lot of work. A lot went into creating a document that isn't going to sit on a shelf and has actual meaning and is really easy to implement once you look at how thoughtful you all have been in terms of the vision of this collaborative partnership. So thank you very much on behalf of the board. And then this is now the time, even though it's information only, we'll take any public comment. So feel free to comment, you know, just try to keep the comments to 3 minutes.
Okay, so for your sake, I'm Jean Zosel, Z-O-S-E-L, Executive Director of Garden City Harvest. And I want to thank Elise for working with me on this. She actually did most of the work on this, so it made it very easy. But we have been doing different versions of this work with MCPS for about the last 10 years. And last time I was here in front of you guys, I was asking you to support the 40-year lease for the Peas Farm so that we could continue doing this work. And it's nice to be back at this point now, memorializing it with the MOU. There's one thing in there that we added that I'm pretty excited about. I think when we were going through this, what felt like a really lengthy process to get more land security at the Peas Farm, which is the hub for all the farm-to-school work that we do, I realized that the school board members, I didn't think really had much of a sense of what we were doing. We were just out there doing this thing. And so we wrote into this agreement that each year we'll go back and look at the MOU and decide if we need to change pieces of it, or if, you know, and Elise is working really closely with Jason Mandela, who is our farm to school director, on the curriculum to make sure that it meshes with MCPS core curriculum values and standards and everything. But we'll come back to you guys once a year and sort of do a report out to let you know, different measurements that we have for this work, and to let you know how it's gone and any changes or tweaks that we're anticipating to make it bigger and better. And, so I'm excited about that part of it too, because then you guys get more of a sense on a regular basis what this really is all about, because it is a big darn deal. And we're really proud of this work, but we're also really, really thrilled to have this recognition from you guys and to have you as partners and collaborators in this work. So thanks to all of you for this. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, then thank you for giving us an update. Thank you, Elise and Jean, for all your work, and we look forward to many additional years of cooperative endeavors. So now we move on to an elementary-only action item, which is to approve an additional bus route. Looks like it's at Lewis and Clark. So Burley, if you want to give us a brief update as to why we need one more bus route.
Yeah, thanks. So this is actually a mini bus what we use mainly to work with families in transition, leveling, and special needs students. So this bus service many schools, not only Lewis and Clark, but because it serviced many schools with staggering bell times, it is really full. So we needed to add another bus. These buses would range from basically the Bonner area all the way to Uncle Robert's up on the South Hills into the Target Range. So a lot of those kids that are being picked up are coming to the Lewis and Clark area for whether it's families in transition or leveling or special need reasons. So Beach really worked hard on trying to make sure that we didn't need to go this route, but some of the areas they go to and sometimes with the special needs being required for some of the students, you can't necessarily use a full-size bus for some of these students and for some of the areas that they're getting into. So we need to look at a new bus route to do that.
Any questions of Burley before I entertain a motion? Seeing none, then is there a motion by an elementary trustee that the trustees approve the proposed new bus route, which is 35 SP and would cover 30.3 miles. Moved by trustee Kendall, seconded by trustee Lorenzen. Is there any board discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, all elementary trustees in favor of approving the additional bus route, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is the elementary trustees present are unanimous. Then we move on to item number 4, which is to grant permission to issue an RFP for a copier. And Pat, I have one question for you. It's listed as an elementary-only action item. Is it going to be copiers that are going to service just middle schools and
It should be
elementary schools?
both, elementary and
Okay.
high school.
So is it okay with trustees to make that correction? Okay. So we'll make it secondary too. So Pat, do you want to give us a short update on?
Sure, and it's more than one copier too. It's a number of copiers. So this is our fleet lease, and what we do is about every 5 years, we go out to bid and replace the copiers out in the buildings. It presents an opportunity for us this year with to network some of these copiers and use the copiers for both printing jobs and faxing services. So that's an enhancement that has begun in a number of places, but will fully implement this go around. But otherwise, it's a lease that we've entered into in the past and look to continue for the next 5 years.
Pat? Trustee Briggshead?
So I just had a question. This was kind of hit on last time that we brought up this, but what are we doing to reduce the amount of paper that we use? You probably knew this question was coming, but thanks.
you know, there is a lot of paper that's used in the buildings, and part of it is tied to budgetary motivation, I guess you'd say, in the building level, just based upon the allocation of discretionary funds to the buildings, and their use of paper, which is billed against their account out in the buildings. In terms of a specific effort to reduce, I'm really not sure if there is one other than building by building and related to that level of consumption.
I would simply add that as we delve further into presentation devices, et cetera, we hope to continue to reduce the amount of copying that's needed. The machines that are out in the building are primarily for those 1 or 2 copies. They're not intended to be full school runs or full class sets. And in fact, we utilize the print shop for those bigger print items, which is certainly more cost effective. But in general, we'll continue to work to reduce the amount of paper that actually flows out to students and then ultimately to backpacks and lockers.
Any other questions? Then is there a motion that we grant permission to issue an RFP for the lease of copiers to replace the current fleet of copiers? Moved by trustee Wake. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee Newbold. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of granting permission to the administration to issue an RFP for the lease of copiers to replace the current fleet of copiers, please indicate by raising your hand. That's all trustees present. Then we move on to 5, which is apparently we'd rather purchase than lease print shop copiers. So if you can give us an update on that, and it is a request that we recommend the purchase of the 3 print shop copiers.
Exactly, thank you. So this item came before the board. We did run an RFP, Burley did, and we made a recommendation for a 5-year lease that we're now asking that we instead make a purchase. And the primary purpose or reason for that is that first of all, the RFP contemplated either. So the responses to the RFP contemplated a purchase price or a lease price, and we can make the purchase at a savings of about $15,000 plus the value of the equipment at the end of the lease, which may be pretty minimal. This year we traded in or sold that equipment for about $2,000, so it's not a significant value at the end of the 5 years. The main reason here is that when we contemplated an operating lease, what we contemplated was that the lease would be with the company servicing the equipment, and instead the lease was through the bank of the manufacturer of the copy machines. And while it was described as a lease, it really had more financing feel to it than an operating lease. So I think that given that, and what I would say is that that's fairly standard in the industry, and was probably something that we could be a little clearer on in our RFP, but and we will in the future. But for this purpose, the purchase would be a better move for the district, and that's why we're making this recommendation.
Any questions of Pat? Trustee Lorenzen?
It says the purchase will be made with building reserve carryover. What
Right.
is building reserve carryover?
So we have, with the building reserve levy, and here the elementary and the high school building reserve levies that we've had in the past, what we've received in addition to the amount of the levy is block grant funds. And those funds have been accumulating, and we've been able to accumulate those funds. And each year that the board approves our budget for the building reserve, it approves not only the $450,000 levy, for instance, in the high school, but also the funds that have been carried over. And so we have the resources, and we have the resources in the form of these carryover dollars, And so what I am recommending is that the funds that we have in place that would typically annually serve this obligation would instead be used in a way that supports the building reserve, since the building reserve is front-loading this cost. So in effect, it becomes us using money from one fund for one purpose, and then using another fund to support the expenditures in the general fund. So we're not borrowing from the other fund, but in effect, that's what's happening. And we're utilizing those resources that we have probably in a more effective way.
Any other questions? Any questions, John? Pardon? Okay, then is there a motion to allow the purchase of the three print shop copiers with building reserve carryover? Moved by trustee Newbold, seconded by trustee Bregstad. Is there any board discussion? I guess I'll just comment, it's nice that you've looked into it closely enough to understand it's going to save us money.
That is a good thing.
Thanks. Any other board comment or discussion? Any public comments?
If I can make one comment.
Sure.
So just to reiterate a point Pat made, essentially what happens is, although we're using the building reserve carryover to front load the purchase, general fund over the 5 years, the term of the lease, will then replenish the building reserve carryover. So essentially, we are borrowing from ourselves and servicing that debt out of the general fund.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of allowing the purchase of the three print shop copiers with building reserve carryover, please indicate by raising your hand. And that's unanimous as to the trustees present. And then we move on to several items that we saw as information-only items, I think, is it the last meeting or a month ago's meeting? But we've seen these before, and now it's actually time to take action on them. So number 6 is for elementary trustees to approve Resolution 2017-6E, which is to call for a school election for elementary school trustees. And Pat, is there any additional information to add?
The only thing I would add, which will apply to the next agenda item as well, the next resolution, is some of the dates we're looking at. The close of filing for individuals wanting to file to be placed on the ballot as a trustee is the 23rd of March, and that filing's with the elections office. If you submit it earlier, then you can submit it through my office, and we'll file it for candidates. The form is available online. It's also available in my office. The withdrawal of candidates who file is March 30th. The write-in deadline is March 30th. And then the certified ballot will be approved by the board on or before March 31st. So we'll schedule a date, hopefully, to certify ballots that would be in advance of that deadline.
Any questions for Pat about the process? Seeing none, is there a motion by an elementary trustee that we approve resolution, or they approve resolution 2017-6E? Moved by trustee Lorenzen and seconded by trustee Newbold. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Seeing none, then all elementary trustees in favor of approving resolution 2017-6E, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to elementary trustees present. Now we move on to item number 7, which is the parallel, which calls for the recommendation is that we approve resolution 2017-5S, which is to call for a school election for high school trustee District D, which I believe is the Lee Clinton area. Okay, and Pat, is there anything of significance that's different with this?
No, it's the same, and I just was going to mention what you did, which is District D is where this trustee will come from, and that is an individual who represents Clinton, Potomac, Sunset, Sealy Swan, and Swan Valley districts in the high school board, so.
Any other questions of Pat? Is there a motion from any trustee to approve, move to approve resolution 2017-5S, moved by trustee Kendall? Is there a second? Seconded by trustee McDonald. Any board discussion? Seeing none, any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of approving Resolution 2017-5S, please indicate by raising your hand. And I think, is Vicky's hand up to be up? Okay. It's, trustee McDonald has an injured arm, so it's resting comfortably up in the air. So it looks like it was unanimous as to all trustees present. And so we'll move on to item number 8, which is to approve the call for school elementary, or for school election for elementary general fund levy. And then we're going to hear in the next topic, although we have to vote separately, about high school general fund levy. So Pat, if you want to, if there's a way to address them both together, even though we'll vote on them separately.
You bet. And so as Chair Holland mentioned, this is the resolution calling for the special election, and here this is the special election authorizing an operating levy. This is a levy in the general fund. Our deadline for doing this is March 21st. We're here before the board just to provide sufficient opportunity to talk about how much that levy might be and to answer any questions about that operating levy. As with the trustee election, the certification of ballots would happen on or before March 31st. So again, we had certify those ballots in a special board meeting or a regular board meeting if possible. And otherwise, with the, as we did last year, in the elementary anyway, there's an opportunity for a general fund operating levy. And in the last 2 years, the board adopted resolutions that we then canceled. This year, there's an opportunity in both the elementary and the high school for an operating levy, and based upon some of the legislature in place and where our budgets look, this, within the school funding formula, I think this would be a year that a levy in both districts would be appropriate. And we can talk a little bit about that in the topic 10, but that's all I have.
Any questions of Pat? Seeing none, then we'll take them separately since one is elementary and the other one is secondary. So is there a motion by an elementary trustee to approve Resolution 2017-7E? Moved by trustee Kendall, is there, and seconded by trustee McDonald. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Seeing none, then all elementary trustees in favor of approving Resolution 2017-7E, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to elementary trustees present. And then we move on to number 9, which is the parallel, which is to approve Resolution 2017-6S, which calls for school election for high school general fund levy. Is there a motion by any trustee to approve this resolution? Moved by trustee Bregstad and seconded by trustee Dupree. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of approving Resolution 2017-6S, please indicate by raising your hand. And that's unanimous as all trustees present. And then we move on to the Pat Show, which is Budget Projections 2017-2018. Catchy title you've come up with. And I believe you have some visual information to support what your discussion is going to be, and this is information only, and in our packet are some preliminary general fund budget projections, which are found beginning on page 30. And so, Pat, if you want to go ahead and provide us.
Would it be all right if I stood up by the screen? That might be.
That should work, I would think.
It looks like the cable maybe got dislodged here.
I'll let you and Superintendent Thane figure out how to.
Yeah, so will I, since I was not very successful before.
We need Dylan to come and help.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm going to pass out some copies of, this is what's in the board packet, but for some reason okay, thanks. Some numbers were missing from some of the graphs, so feel free to take a copy of that. And this presentation, or this, what's in the packet, will be on the website, so you can see it in live and in color. So the, let's see, the first item here, and there's no reason that you need to see this from from your seat. You have it in front of you, which is good because it's a lot of small numbers. What this reflects, this document here, are some projections regarding our general fund budget, and the projections are based upon the governor's proposal, which is presently Senate Bill 191. And in a nutshell, it provides for a 1.37% increase, inflationary increase to a number of the funding components. It eliminates the data for achievement funding component, and it also eliminates the natural resource development payment. And so this is a reflection of that. It's also a reflection of our estimates for enrollment, or A and B, and that's our February A and B count will dictate the budgets. So what we're doing here is taking on our October count and estimating for the February count. The pointer doesn't really work, so I'll have to describe what you're looking at. If you look at the top of that spreadsheet, you'll see a heading called Elementary, and underneath Elementary, it's broken into two separate columns. One column has a levy of $935,000, and the other column has a $0 levy, and so that's contemplating no levy. The $935,000 levy under these sort of facts is what would be the maximum amount allowed under the school funding formula. And if you'll recall, we had opportunities, or the board did, to run levies last year and the year before. In 2016, it was about $580,000, and last year, $730,000. And so this year, it's $935,000. And under the school funding formula, this is reflective of the sharing of funding between the state and the local taxpayer. And under these funding scenarios, the governor's proposal. On the secondary side, if you just follow that top column right across, you'll see the same information. You have a $404,000 levy and then also a $0 levy, or no levy. Interestingly enough, in the high school, at least at the present time, is this doesn't represent the maximum budget in the high school. What's allowed by statute is the ability to adopt the greater of the maximum budget or the prior year adopted budget plus inflationary increases. And so this budget contemplates the higher of those two scenarios, which is the prior year budget plus inflationary increases, which is interesting under current statute because this would actually allow us to levy and budget the amount of the data for achievement, because that was in the prior year budget, just excluding the inflationary piece, which is only about $5,000. I'm not sure if they're going to change that when they get through evaluating this legislation, but it is an interesting scenario with how the statute currently plays out. So what I'm reflecting here essentially is the highest voted levy and what that budget would look like, and then the no voted levy and what that budget would look like. So as that spreadsheet, the projections follow itself through, you'll see under each column the estimated increase to the general fund based upon the passage of those levies, or in the instance of no levy, what that increase would be. We add to that increase the savings associated with certified and classified retirements of $240,000, and then we have a subtotal that's in bold there that reflects what budget we would have to work with. Underneath that, what we do know now, based upon a 3-year settlement with our employee groups, is that we're at a 2.25% increase for most groups, along with the 30 cents per cell increase for MMCEO. These are estimates based upon those negotiated settlements of what the salary and benefit increases would look like, so they can be plugged in to the spreadsheet. And then if we scroll ahead, you can see on your page 30 where we have a bottom plus number of 450,000 with that full levy, and a negative 480 without the levy in the elementary, and a negative 80 even with a full levy in the high school, and a negative 480 with no levy in the high school. So These estimates, as you'll see from the blanks under the anticipated obligations, do not contemplate some increases that we know we'll have. We'll have inflationary increases to insurance, utilities, SRO, CRO, SSOs. We also know that we'll likely have, or possibly have, classroom staff in the elementary side. We'll most likely have custodial staff increases based upon our increase in square footage that we've added through the bond projects, along with some other areas that we would need to tackle. So I'm just showing those as placeholders for additional budgetary obligations, and giving you an initial look at what the projections might be when the legislature finishes their work relative to school funding, and when we count students in February under the A and B count. Unless there are questions, I'll jump to the next slide.
That's what I was going to say. Should we take questions
Yeah,
on
you bet.
topic by topic?
Sure.
Any questions thus far? I have one question just to make sure I understand it. So there are some items in the governor's proposed budget that used to be funded at the state level, two
Right.
different areas. And under his proposed budget, he's removing state funding for those.
That's
And
correct.
so it's kind of typical that the local governments can then meet those obligations through, either you pay your state income taxes and you get funded that way, or you pay levies or whatever and you pay them that way. So it's no different to the taxpayer in terms of a potential amount of money. It's just who's collecting the money? Is that kind of?
Yes, so and you're right. So the data for achievement payment represents about $112,000 as part of the funding component in the elementary, and about $80,000 in the high school. So that funding component was added, I want to say, in 2014, 2013 timeframe. And when it was added, it's a completely state-funded component of the funding formula. When it gets peeled back, that piece of the funding formula was used to calculate the base budget, which is the amount that all school districts have to adopt. When you pull that off of the equation, what you end up doing is lowering the base budget for all the schools. And what that has the effect of doing in an enrollment growing area like the elementary is creating, it doesn't even create an opportunity for the overbase levy, because that'll still be the same. What it does is it reduces your base budget amount, and your ultimate budget authority drops by those amounts. 112 in the elementary and 80 in the high school. And then on the natural resource development payment, that represented a $248,000 offset to the local levy for base budget authority in the elementary, and about a $210,000 offset to local revenue, or local taxes in the high school. And when that was put in place, the intent was that funding source would offset inflationary increases, so the local taxpayer wouldn't feel the inflationary impact as much. And what'll happen instead is that the local taxpayer will pick up what was paid for by the natural resource development, and so will the state in the form of guaranteed tax base aid. So this natural resource development payment was really not necessarily, it was coming out of a specific source of revenue the state had that they felt like they could use to offset minimize the local tax impact. And when they pull it away, that becomes more of a tax allocation, and it's about split equally between the local taxpayer and guaranteed tax base aid. But it is part of what you've probably read about in terms of the reduction in funding to the education, the 20-some odd million dollars.
Any other questions? Trustee Newell?
Is there any predictability as to when the legislature acts on the budget in relation to the timing for an election here locally?
Yeah, great question. It's actually moving along very well. So the Senate Bill 191, I think unanimously passed the Senate at 100, or the House, 100 to 1 in favor, or 100 to 0 in favor. So I think there is motivation certainly at the House level, and I hear from the Senate side too, to move it along so that schools know what they're what they can expect, and they can set levies and do that sort of thing. So certainly that's been an issue in the past.
Any other questions? And sounds like there's more information.
There is, like it or not. So the next item that you have in the board packet on page 31 is just a representation of our budget and budget expenditures from 2016. And I'm not going to go through these numbers at all. I'm only providing those just to point out really where we spend our dollars. And so if you look on the, here I'm going to talk about it just briefly. But if you look at the elementary side, the total salaries and benefits represent 91% of our expenditures. And on the high school, 88% for salaries and benefits. And what I just showed you is really looking at salaries and benefit impact. The other impact budgetarily is minimal. And so that's I guess the good news, even though we show some negative balances. With these other obligations, we're not going to see some huge dollar items. We're really hitting those on the salary and benefit side. That's all I have on that slide. So what in your packet, for the next slide on page 32, it does have the numbers, and unfortunately it's not in color, but what's on the screen is. And when it's on the website, it'll also be in color. This is just a bar graph that shows where our budgets have gone in the elementary general fund, and it's our maximum budget. And so on the top of the graph, you'll see the number, the adopted budget, not always maximum, because 2017, 2016, we didn't run a voted levy, so we adopted less than maximum budgets. And then between the graphs, you'll see the increase in budget authority for each of those years. And what I show from FY17 to FY18 is if we ran the full levy at $935,000, and the budgetary increase would be $1.4 million.
Before you move on.
Yeah.
I would just note that as you look at that elementary graph, you also need to contemplate that there's about a 500 student enrollment increase over that period of time. So the budget's increased, enrollment increased significantly also at that point in time.
Yeah, and I think you'll see from these graphs that very point, which is a great point, because then the high school, if we flip to that, it's on the same scale, and you can just see really how flat the high school budgets have been. And I'll flip back to the elementary, and you guys can see it in the packet, but it's pretty remarkable. The elementary has an upward trajectory, very much tied to enrollment. The high school is very flat up until here recently, which has presented budgetary problems that you know, as a board, you guys have done a good job of solving and maintaining programs. The next slide I'll jump to, and to Mark's point, this is A and B in the elementary. So this represents, and the top number, you'll see the A and B for those various years. It's high, we're climbing. It's very much a strong enrollment population in the elementary district.
And can you remind everyone, for anyone who might be watching, what A and B stands for?
Yeah.
Since it's an acronym that stands for the strangest thing ever.
It does.
It really means bodies and seats, right?
It really means enrollment. Yeah, and you're right, it is a formula that's average number belonging. So you average 2 enrollment counts and multiply it by a factor that represents the number of days in the year, inclusive of PIR days. So you get a little bump, but it's enrollment. Yeah, thanks. Strangest term ever. So just like the general fund budget, the jump on the A and B graph is just as remarkable. You can see up on the screen there, and what is in the packet I passed around and the screen is the increase in A and B from one year to the next, and that's not in the packet, but will be on the website. So very minimal increase and in some cases decrease. And that A and B has a strong correlation to that high school budget in the elementary, which we saw back, whoopsie. Yeah, actually saw right there. All right. So then, the next slide, if there are no questions on these two, should I just proceed? So the sort of tracking the correlation between voted levy and budgetary increase is what's reflected by this graph, and I'm sorry, what's in the packet is black and white, but it is. And what you'll see, and what you can see better from this graph, is that the bar that's represented in green represents the general fund increase from one year to the next, and what's in that orange or tangerine color is the voted levy that year. And what you can sit back and look at and see from this graph is that the elementary experienced some pretty significant increases in the general fund without significant voted levies. And in fact, we have a number of years without voted levies. Our overbase levy for the past 3 years has been the exact same. We passed that levy in 2014 for the 2014-15 year. That was the $181,000 levy. That created an overbase levy of just over $6 million, which has stayed intact for 3 years prior to, for 3 years in a row. So for FY 15, 16, and 17. High school, again, remarkable in comparison. Very much smaller increases, very little in the way of levies, but the one you have to look at is 2012, 2013. This is the year I talk about ad nauseum, the year that we passed in May a $710,000 levy in order for our budgets to go up by $5,000. And in that year, we experienced declining enrollment, but we also experienced some funding changes at the state level. And so, so what this levy allowed us to do is to pass a voted levy to maintain budget authority, which really has allowed the high school program, the high school budget, to maintain during a declining enrollment period. And during that period, only in 2012, 2013 did we use that $710,000 levy. The next year, the next years after that, we recovered and were able to increase our budget without passing that levy because we had it in our back pocket, but we didn't use it fully. And I'm working on a spreadsheet that'll demonstrate that a little better. And I think, okay, so then the next slide, you don't have in your packet, but I put this slide in the packet when we adopted budgets in August. What it reflects is the number of mills that we've levied over this period of time, 08 till FY17. And this is in the elementary, and this excludes the debt service that we recently ran, but this isn't an upward trajectory, and you saw the general fund budgetary increases. And so what this reflects is a couple of things. Our tax valuations, or our tax base, is growing. So when we do grow budget, we're spreading that tax burden around more taxpayers. So when we have TIFs that come back online, it helps us. When we have growth in Missoula, it helps us. This also reflects times when budget, or when levies have dropped off. So we know that we have building reserve levies of $500,000 that has dropped off. We also have one that will drop off in the high school, a $450,000 levy in 2018. And the other levy, the elementary, was $376. I want to say it's also dropped off. So it's not that we're adding mills at a certain level each year and getting the benefit of tax valuations. We're doing the opposite. We're picking a number, backing, or we're not picking, but the funding formula dictates a number. We back into the number of mills, and then we levy, and if tax valuations go up, then the number of mills go down. And if we pull levies off the table in different funds, then we also get this overall flat graph. This isn't the way in all government revenue generating or mill treatment. The high school is even more remarkable, where we're actually levying less mills now than we were 10 plus years ago, again excluding the debt service. So this was trying to keep all things being equal. And just sort of to kind of address what is easy to be perceived, and that is every time you run a ballot or run a levy election, that it's stacked on top of the previous one. That is sometimes the case. It's not always the case. This chart is one that's a work in progress, but it's intended to demonstrate the school funding formula. And if you look at the purple, the line between purple and red, that represents the base budget. And by state law, we're obligated to adopt budgets at that level. And this is the elementary. The red above the purple represents the over base levy, and that's what we're allowed by state law to levy in the form of a voted tax levy. And that voted levy does accumulate and does carry from year to year, and as long as it's used, it'll stay intact for up to 5 years. The green represents guaranteed tax base from the state, and the blue is the portion of local tax dollars that supports the base budget. The purple is really state funding. And so when we look at 2017, you're going to pull out data for achievement. The purple goes down, the base budget goes down. It goes up here because of enrollment, but otherwise it would drop. The high school, you'll see it a little better, maybe, sort of. But if you look at it in this context, it's, again, very consistent. And then the tax, and then the impact of enrollment is seen more in the purple-red line in the elementary, as that funding obligation grows as the base budget grows. So the state obligation grows, and so does the local obligation. And that's the end of my slides. Yeah.
Can you put the last one up?
Yeah.
A couple questions. Well, one question was, I think you said the overbase levy at the elementaries is at 6 million? So
Yeah, and I don't have that
think
number.
you said
I-
what it was for the high school.
Yeah, let me give you that exact number, because I kind of threw it out there. And that's something that I will have on the updated spreadsheets.
While Pat looks for that, I would like to make one comment. In your packet on 36 and 37, he had the graph that demonstrated the budget as well as the voted levies. And it's important to note, in both the elementary and the secondary district, we have actually voted a mill levy only once in the last 5 years in each district. The last column of each of those graphs represents what we could potentially run this spring. But again, we have not gone out for operating levies on a routine basis. It's been basically once in the last 5 years in each district.
Okay, so in the elementary, it's almost $7 million, and in the high school, it's almost $6 million.
Another question.
Yeah.
So when we look at this graph, I understand the blue and the red are both paid locally.
Yeah.
The purple is paid by the state.
Right.
And the green is what?
That's also paid by the state, and I separated it out because it's guaranteed tax base aid. So the purple portion of the graph is calculated primarily based upon enrollment. So you have and also educators. You have the quality educator payment, you have the per A and B entitlement, you have the basic entitlement, you have also the at-risk payment, da-da-da-da. So that's very calculatable. And then the base budget is tied to enrollment primarily, and once you calculate base, you can back out those other calculated funding components. And then the guaranteed tax base represents, it's a calculation that that really reflects how much of our tax base is less than the state recognized tax base. So the state will use a formula to say, and this is a fairness sort of calculation, that it's not fair for the tax base in some districts to be below this threshold, and if it is, the state will subsidize that part. And we get some of that subsidy as well. And so some districts, most do get it, but some do not get guaranteed tax base subsidy, but we do.
Any questions on this way or this way? Any other questions for Pat? Well, seeing none, this is information only, but any comments from the public? Seeing none, well, thanks for that update. The visuals kind of help, I think. It's very helpful to see the color ones help even more than the black and white ones. Just kind of visual information. So now we move on to number 11, which, pardon. Oh, my microphone's been moving. We're moving on to 11, which is the revision of Board Policy 7332, which is advertising in schools and revenue enhancement. I believe what we're going to do on this is first, it's information only, so Pat's going to explain where it's come from, because it came from the committee model that we had. So it really isn't a first reading yet. We'll have that later, but just to give us an update on why it's now appearing.
It's exactly right, and so the what we're looking at is some revenue enhancement opportunities, and primarily at the stadium and the high school gyms, and as a fundamental purpose with the idea that we get in front of the obligation to replace the turf in 10 to 12 years and to not look to the voters when that comes about. And so this is a potential means of generating revenue that we can hopefully accumulate and use for that type of purpose as well as maybe others. We're putting together a committee that will look at those types of ideas, the type of inventory we might identify as subject to advertising, and really most likely engage an expert in this area who would help us develop a plan that we would share with the board. And so when we started down this road, I went to pull the policy and found out that it was never really adopted, but the board went quite a ways down that path on the policy and has made some great changes to it. And that's what you have in the packet is where it was left off. We thought it'd be a good idea to kind of digest it a little bit and review it before we put it out there for first reading. So I've reviewed it. I think it's a good general overview of a policy, but I'm sure you'll have questions and potential changes.
Any questions for Pat? Since this is for information only and it's a lot to digest, we'll take student trustee comments, or?
Yeah, I just had, I didn't want to stumble over my words too much, so I typed a little something. It just has to do with some of the wording in the revision. It's in the agenda item 7B11. The wording that I believe the board may want to reconsider is as follows, quote, "and through signage meeting the City of Missoula's sign code." This is found in the proposed revision midway down page 39 in the packet. And as a Sentinel DECA chapter president, this wording concerns me not for the Sentinel sign that was generously installed thanks to Sentinel DECA in the fall of 2009, given that that sign is already grandfathered. Rather, the concern that I have is for other schools in the district that may want to pursue installing such a sign. Because had this been board policy in 2009, Sentinel Beckett could not have installed this sign because it did not meet the City of Missoula's restrictive sign code. We could only make this project possible because all public schools in Montana sit on state-owned public land, thus exempting them from local sign ordinances. So this proposed provision would essentially rescind a right that is expressly granted to high schools under state law. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention because I know there was a lot of trouble in 2009. Mr. Hartman's informed me when they tried to install that sign that they faced a lot of controversy with the Missoula Sign Code because it was too big. And the other issue they had was having advertisements of other businesses on that sign, but they looked at it as a recognition of sponsorship. And then ultimately they talked to people in the neighborhood and they talked to a lot of people, but they faced the most opposition from the actual city of Missoula. And then they came to find out, and then once they realized that all public high schools are on state-owned land, that they are exempt from those ordinances, that's what allowed it. So I'm just worried because I know that I believe Chief Charlo is looking into possibly putting up a sign like the one on Sentinel. And since they're in a neighborhood type area of the town, I feel like if this is in the policy, it might be more difficult for schools to do this in the future. So,
Great suggestion.
Thank you. Any other comments? I've read it through once, and I appreciate your letting us look at it again on first reading and yet on second reading so that we can look carefully, and I'm sure you'll take Dylan's comments into consideration. Anything else at this point? Because we will be considering this for possible action within, a couple of months anyway, because it's first reading and then second reading. So we try to change board policy in a fairly thoughtful manner instead of very quickly. Trustee Newbold?
Pat, you mentioned a committee, and I wasn't clear on whether that was a committee that would be established moving forward in relation to advertising, but I'm wondering about advertising rates and how we set those, or maybe that's not an appropriate thing to have in policy. Maybe that's more of a procedure, so.
Right, we wouldn't plug it into the policy, but it's really, this policy probably initiated 6 or 7 years ago, and we haven't done much with it, but it's the idea that why the committee would look at, or I'd recommend we look at a professional to help assist with setting those rates, and then really coming up with a plan that identifies realistic inventory and packages of advertising that the board could look at and that we could share. Because I think that the reason it's tough for this to move forward is that we just have a lot of people in the district that are very sharp and talented, but it's a unique area, this area of advertising. So we're open to bend the brain of some people that do this professionally.
And I have one question just to make sure I'm clear. On page 41, it says adopted on September 12, 26. Was some version of this that we don't have in front of us adopted back then? So there's a really, really early version. And then there was substantial committee work. And then it just, in the scheme of things,
That's
for a
the best
variety
I
of
can
reasons.
tell.
Okay.
Yep.
And so we do have some type of policy, but it doesn't address a lot of the concerns that a group of people have looked at and brought forward. Okay. Thanks. Anything else from trustees? Trustee Kendall?
I'm sorry, I have to admit, I didn't see the first part of this, and so I'm just looking at it for the first time. But there is a list on page 39 of advertisements and sponsorships will not be approved if they, and there's a long list, and all that is good, but the promote discrimination part is much shorter than the old one. If you look at the end, on page 41, the very last paragraph, there's a whole long list of things that includes ethnicity, sexual orientation. I just wonder, as I'm looking through this for the first time, and again, I apologize for that, why is this list so much more limited than that? Is there a reason for that, or?
I don't have an answer, because I think some of those changes happened really, after I was looking at the policy, so I'm not sure.
I personally would want the discrimination to be as, I mean, if we're going to lay out what all the things are that people can be discriminated against, I would like to have a longer list than this.
Well, hopefully, if it's all right, I would work with Bia's office
Yeah.
and talk with them about
Good.
the best approach.
Yeah, thanks.
I was going to suggest that it match the policy language in other policies. I can't quite recall the whole list, but it is a longer list in policy.
Any other trustee comments? And this is information only at this point, but any public comment? Seeing none, then let me get back to my agenda. Okay, we're on to item C1, which is to look at the superintendent's contract and its terms. And just so if I understand the process, we began this conversation, I think, at the last meeting. So there's a couple of ways to go, and I'm sure Megan will help me, correct me when I'm wrong, but at this point, Superintendent Thane has a contract for 3 years, beginning from last July 1st. And at the time we approved that contract as a board, we left the compensation amount blank for the next 2 years, and we settled upon a compensation amount for this going, we're almost at the end of this fiscal year. And so one of the things we need to do is basically fill in those blanks in some fashion. And so there are two different ways to approach it. We can either amend the current contract, say to fill in those blanks, and to possibly change other things like certain requests that Superintendent Thane and our legal counsel have been discussing concerning some minor portions of the contract. I think there's only one or two, or maybe just two. And so we can start by either coming up with some amendments to the current contract and identifying them, and then either tonight, but probably more realistically, putting them on as an agenda item with a summary as to what the changes would be so that we'd get adequate notice to the public, then we could act on them in a following meeting. There's an alternative that happens in the state a lot, which is to just write a new contract. Instead of trying, I know at some point in the past, a former superintendent's contract had so many amendments that it was hard to actually understand what the terms of the current contract was. So I talked to Megan and Bia, and a suggestion is to come up with just a new contract. So it's clearly supplementing or supplanting the new contract, not supplementing it. And because of the timing of things, we can only extend a contract for 3 years to superintendent. So I think Superintendent Thane has asked for a 2-year contract as opposed to a 3-year contract, because if we adopted a 3-year contract, then we're giving him an extra 6 months. So we're really giving him a longer contract than is allowed by state law. So tonight, I leave it up to the board. We can either start talking about which direction we want to go. Do we want to have a new contract? If we do, it seems reasonable to do it in a 2-year term so as not to violate state law, and then to talk about setting the compensation for the blanks that we have in the current contract and seeing if we can agree that it looks reasonable to meet Mark's requests into 2 fairly specific areas. So I leave it up to the board first to, kind of start the conversation about which way we want to go. New contract, amendment to the current contract. Any thoughts? Trustee Newbold?
Can we discuss what the changes would be? Because if they are fairly simple, then I'm thinking it wouldn't read in a complicated fashion if we just made amendments.
Okay, yeah, I mean, legal counsel recommends against doing that just because then you have to keep track of like which line items you update. Like if a person asks for the contract for the superintendent, then you have to make sure that the amendments explain exactly which positions get changed. But if Megan can explain some of the requested, I think there's 2 areas of the requested change. If you have that, or Superintendent Thane, I know knows what it is because he's asked about it.
I can see 2, but please correct me if I'm missing anything. So the first, obviously, is to set the compensation for the 17-18 school year and then the 18-19 school year. So that would be the full 3-year term
that started this past July 1. And then the second has to do with some additional payments or an increase in the payment to a tax shelter annuity. And then also providing the option that Superintendent Thane would have is to not actually have a payment into that tax sheltered annuity, but instead take cash in lieu of compensation, which is allowed, or tax in lieu of the benefit, which is allowed under the law. Did I miss? Okay. And I can give you the specific numbers for the compensation, which is my understanding matches the increases for other staff.
I
So,
think generally speaking, it might have been rounded up by $1 or $2.
Yeah.
Just to make it come out to an even number as opposed to paying $29,243.62.
Yeah.
So what would those amounts be then?
so for the 17-18 school year, it would be $158,500. And for the 18-19 school year, $162,500.
Just so I understand, that's proportional to the degree of increase that all staff, except for those people who were getting 30 cents. I mean, there's some small bargaining groups that had to be dealt with differently because of the manner in which they're compensated.
It's my understanding, yes.
Okay. Is that helpful? Okay. Does everyone understand those four things, I guess?
And the increase to the tax shelter annuity is by $250. So it's from an initial $1,250 to $1,500 month. But it was always month.
Just a clarification on that piece, last year when the contract was settled, the tax sheltered annuity amount was reduced, and so what I'm asking is that be restored in increments over the next 2 years.
Yeah, it would be increased to $1,750 for the 18-19 school year.
And as I understand it, that's really, I mean, it was a greater amount, and somehow between the contract, the one-year contract and then the three-year contract, it was reduced, and we're just getting it back to the level that was offered to other superintendents. I mean, not, go ahead, sorry. Trustee Lawrence.
Does the tax shelter annuity take the place of teacher's retirement for a superintendent?
No, but there is a little bit of a quirk there. What happens with all certified employees at the time they retire and sever, they're paid out at 50% of their accrued unused sick leave by agreements that we have with the district. In the case of the superintendent, it's 25%, so there's a differential there. So the tax shelter would be in lieu of that additional 25%.
And is there a state statute that doesn't, I mean, just some,
Yes, there is a statute basically that cannot be deviated from even through bargaining with superintendents in terms of that severance pay for sick leave.
Trustee McDonald, is your hand up? I'm sorry, it's just, I'm trying to make sure I'm not, trying to make sure I don't ignore you if you have a question. Trustee Kendall.
I have a question and then a comment. Is there a deadline of any kind associated with this? Oh, okay, so it's not like, okay. Great, and then,
He's been hired for 3 years, and we know we're paying him until July 1st.
right, okay,
July 1st, that's.
okay. I just want to say, if a comment is appropriate at this time. I don't have any concerns about the terms that we're talking about. It all sounds really reasonable to me, and I think we're getting a bargain. I'll just put that out there. But I do want to avoid some of the transparency issues that our predecessors faced in earlier years. And I do want to err on the side of being more transparent. So I really like what I think was your suggestion that the contract be rewritten supplanted, I believe was your word. And, right, and so these modifications be put into the contract, it be written anew, and then we get it in our packet and approve it, or consider it with the idea of approving it in the next board meeting that it's appropriate to do that. I mean, that's how I'd like to have it done, so I'm just throwing that out there.
Any other comments? Okay.
I agree with Heidi. I think I just need to go home. Oh.
And it's not even as late as it's been in the past. I have one suggestion, just in consideration of Trustee Breakstad's comments earlier. There's just 2 sections of the contract beyond compensation that are being changed. So rather than attaching the entire proposed contract, when we see negotiations with other bargaining units, there's a summary in the packet that identifies specifically the changes made, and that way we don't have to have the entire contract when it's only 2 sections plus compensation. Would it be okay not to attach the entire contract, but have a summary area saying these specific areas are the only ones that are being changed, and the current contract's available at the office?
If I can answer that question as one trustee, yes, I think that would be fine, as long as people understand that if they would like to look at the contract itself, I mean, some people really like that stuff, then it's available for people to see.
We always put that language in there that this is the highlight, but like we say, approve all the expenditures, but the warrants are available in the office for review. If anyone has any concerns about how individual checks are being written to people, we do notify in our agenda that.
Yes, and by virtue of Montana law, it's a public record anyway, so it would be disclosed pursuant to the public record statutes.
Trustee Lorenzen?
I just want to emphasize that there's no reflection on Mr. Thane that we're not offering a 3rd year on this contract. It's actually a practice that's gone on. It's always bothered me. 3 years is 36 months. And yet, if we were to approve an added a year now, we'd be giving him a 42-month contract. I actually thought about going to legislature and asking somebody to change that law, because what happens in those districts where they give their superintendent in January, give them a 42-month contract, that superintendent has longer tenure than any elected board member. And it's always seemed to me that is an improper balance of power between the board and the superintendent. And I admire Mr. Thane for recognizing it and bringing it forward. So it's no reflection on him that we don't tack on that 3rd year like some people do. It's simply a correction to what I consider a bad practice.
Any other comments? It's information only, but any public comment? And if you can just restate your name, and then we'll have further comment when it's actually an action item.
Thank you. Melanie Charlson, President, Missoula Education Association. Just for the record, I wanted to give a thank you to Superintendent Thane. I think this is a very reasonable request, and I really do appreciate the amount matching what all others who received a percentage increase on their next year's contracts. Thank you very much.
So as I understand it, the direction that I'll give to Megan and her office is that for the next board meeting, we will include in the agenda item a summary of the changes that are being proposed, which include the increases in the salary that generally match or percentage increases that were awarded to other bargaining units, and the change to the TSA to get it back to where it was, and then the sick leave.
There's nothing with the sick leave.
Oh, not with this, anyway, there's 4 areas: salary year, this coming year, salary the year after that, changes to the TSA, and there's one other change. And so each of those 4 will be identified, and then put a notification that the entire contract, both as it currently exists, and we can even make a highlight, maybe a legislatively edited page so you can see which sections are changed, can be available upon request. Is that okay with everybody? And so then at the next meeting, it will be an action item. And so it's okay to bring it forward for the February Valentine's Day meeting? How's that?
There's only one other change, and that's just the
Oh,
term.
sure.
The term will change to a 2-year term from a 3-year term.
Okay. Okay, does that seem okay with everyone in terms of general direction to give to our attorney? Okay, is that okay with everybody else? And
Thank you.
Mr. Thing? Okay, so we'll proceed in that fashion then and bring it back in 2 weeks and address it. And so we now come to the second to the last item on the agenda before we adjourn, which is public comment on non-agenda items. In case anyone couldn't get here at the beginning of the meeting, we try to make sure there's a second opportunity for public comment. Any public comment on non-agenda items? Seeing none, we're done. Thank you so much for everyone for being here.
Can I get everybody's signature too on these resolutions?